Maverick Dialogs.
Hey guys, Peter Maverick with you. Beautiful sunny day in New York, Central Park, and I'm taking interview of my dear friend Eugene, who's guru in product management, product market fit, and starting very successful startups. So he will share with you his experience, insights, and maybe some practical jokes. So enjoy the show. Okay guys, let me introduce my dear friend Eugene Baron. Great name. And we're sitting in the middle of Central Park. Again, beautiful day, beautiful New York skyline. And the first question to you is pretty much tell us about yourself. You know, how did you end up in the United States? What was your experience? How did you end up as a chief product officer? Just a couple words.
Hi guys, I'm here in New York for the past 30 years, pretty much all my recent life. I started as a developer, went into consulting and then into product management, and most recently I became a serial head of product, 5 startups, go-to-market, ideation, product market fit. That's my biggest strength. Early stage startups, that's my love. As you all know, 80% of them fail, but 20 of them survive.
Okay. Well, thanks for the intro. Tell us about the most epic fail, the epic fuck up when you try to pull a startup off.
We built a beautiful AI-driven NLP travel assistant before it became technologically possible. It was all working fine, but we didn't realize that it cost about $30 to acquire every user in the travel industry, and we didn't have that money. We had a functional product, but we couldn't market it, we couldn't go through user acquisition, we didn't have funds for it. So we had to shut down an excellent functioning product.
That's cool. So it's I would say typical, Death Valley situation where you have product but don't have money to develop and bring product to the market, right?
Exactly.
So tell us about where do you start? Do you start with the market? Do you start with the client problem? Do you start with the product? Where typically would start all this development?
You start with a business plan.
Okay.
You have to understand what would it cost to bring your product to the market. Idea is nothing. Building the product is a part of the task, but making it successful, that's the hardest part of it. You have to have enough funds, or at least a plan on how you will raise the funds to get you to market, to get the network effect.
Well, tell us, what is a minimum viable product? What are the practical implications of this very, very, very well-known framework? Well, tell us.
So it's a one step up from a working prototype.
Okay.
You don't want to invest too much money into building your MVP, especially if you have some automation that you need to develop. You probably want to fake it until you make it, until you have some traction and some money to develop your product fully. It's really something that you can show to your early adopters and understand if there is an actual need to collect the data for it. To make it short, your MVP is really for you to gather data, to direct your future development of the product.
Okay. Well, let me clarify that. So my understanding is very tricky to find a balance between being able to demonstrate all features and facets of the product and investing too much. So what would be a characteristic of a right balance minimum viable product, and how much do you typically need to invest in a minimum viable product?
As I said, the main goal of the minimum viable product is to gather data for you. So you have to have a nice looking interface. with all the main features outlined, buttons that people have to click on, and the functionality that is easy to understand. What's behind that button? It's not that important. It might work slowly. Maybe you even have a person who is doing manually something that you would automate in the future, but it has to do the work that it's supposed to do. For example, you're building a product that would create contracts automatically. In your minimum viable product, you might have an actual person who would write that contract manually for those 10, 20 early adopters who would actually be there to experience your product. You don't want to invest in this whole automation until you have the value.
Cool. So how much do you typically invest in a minimum viable product?
It depends on what your product is doing, but you invest as little as possible on the back end and as much as possible on the front end. That's really your demo.
Okay. And okay, let's say you have a solid minimum viable product. How do you test hypothesis about product market fit, whether it's it's good for the client, whether the client buy into this thing? What will be examples?
If you take the example of contract writing,
okay,
portal, we invest in data collection. We have to put a very robust analytics behind the product because that's what you need the MVP for. You invest some into marketing to find those early adopters. You invest in customer support because you want to guide those early adopters through your journey to make sure that they have the experience that the future users would really have.
Right. Well, how do you account for maybe cultural differences or differences in the market? Because what we're trying to convey and help startups, founders from around the world. They come from different countries, from Asia to Africa to Latin America. They want to build a startup in the United States. What should you account for when you engage in this kind of pursuit?
The biggest difference, I would say, that here is everything about money. So your startup might be doing a very useful thing that at least the founders think that it's a very useful thing. But in reality, it will probably be in the 80% that fail just because you didn't get your accounting and business model right. You didn't account like we did for the user acquisition. You didn't account for the regulations. You didn't account for go-to-market and so on. The most important thing, if I can summarize in the startup, is to have a secret sauce, something that everyone else doesn't. Otherwise, everybody would be making startups.
So you have to be unique and differentiated, right?
Yes, and it's not just your idea, but it also your connections in the marketplace, your connections with partners, people that you know, people that will help you to bring your product to market. For example, you're building a payment method. No one will know about your payment method unless you know someone at Walmart who would add your payment method to the checkout workflow. Okay. And then suddenly millions of people will have that option and will say, oh, what is that? Interesting, let me check.
Okay. So that's what people call POC, right? Proof of concept.
Not exactly. So okay. You have POC. First of all, you have to build POC before you talk to your friend at Walmart. Okay. You have to have a fully functional product before you show it to your friend. But it's very important to have that friend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, tell us more about the benefits and about networking. People who you know, and being also an immigrant and a first generation. How did you build your network? Where do you start? What's the secret of success?
It's important to live in one of the two hubs of startup life. It's either in New York or Silicon Valley. That's where people meet. That's where all the connections are happening. I live in New York for 30 years. My network is enormous. So if you know me, you know many people.
That's true. I can fully support that and confirm. So if you guys want to have your own network, just you find Eugene Baron on LinkedIn and try to make friends with him. Okay, cool. So if, for example, just following on this question, I understand that networks are private and you have to be very cautious and sensitive to this. But again, if a startup or founder needs to find his or her way to some significant people in venture capital world or in a network of angels, something like this, what may be some of the tools, ideas, what to do, how to do it more efficiently?
There are dozens of networking events that are happening in New York every week. And if you have a particular person that you want to meet, you go to the event where this person is presenting or where he would be attending, which is harder to track. And then he's there probably to meet other people as well and to network. And that's probably would be the best spot to meet, exchange contact information, and then follow up immediately.
Okay, cool. Let's then switch a little bit the topic to product market fit. Well, people talk about product market fit. What's your experience? What are do's and don'ts? How to arrange and test product market fit? What are the most efficient ways?
The biggest mistake that startups make, they don't research product market fit at all. Once you understand that it's the first thing that you need to do, you start with collecting data. That can be first-party data, that may be third-party data. That depends on your product. Data is expensive. So you have to always measure how much you spend on acquiring your data versus what is your budget. It's a very fine balance. And it largely depends if your product is B2B or B2C. You might have to do interviews, you might have to purchase data, you might have to find consultants who know that particular market that will help you with the product market fit.
How do you engage people in clients in interview? How do you find them?
You have to pay them.
Okay.
That's why it becomes expensive and time consuming.
Okay.
And that's why a lot of startups cut corners and don't do that.
And end up in... Okay. So your suggestion not to cut corners?
My suggestion is to cut some corners, but you have to be prepared that product market fit is expensive and lengthy.
Okay. How important for success of a startup, advisors, boards of advisors, this kind of senior people who can open doors, bring network, help with investments?
That's super important. That is part of your secret sauce.
Okay. What about your team? How do you build your team step by step? What people are most important in the first phase, second phase?
So in the startup, most people should be wearing multiple hats.
Okay.
They should have a combination of specific subject matter with methodology of what they're doing. So, for example, if you're looking for head of product, it would be perfect if your head of product launched a similar product before and he knows ins and outs, he knows the customers, and he's a part of your secret sauce.
Okay. Well, in my experience, the most difficult and most important thing in an organization is like corporate culture. Because in some places it's very productive, very creative. Other places it's really, depressing, if you wish. In your experience, do you agree with this statement? And if so, what are the good examples of building productive, constructive, and fun corporate culture from the very beginning?
If we're talking with the people from other countries, it really helps if you're a startup founder and you're coming from a particular part of the world. It's important to have people in your team that understand your culture.
Right.
I know that people from Southern Asia tend to work together well, where people from Eastern Europe have a totally different culture and they also tend to work together well.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you for your time. Give us a couple of, I don't know, words for new startups, new founders from around the world who want to enter the US market, who are ambitious enough to leave their own country and to build a startup, a real unicorn.com in the most competitive, lucrative, the best market in the world.
Talk to someone who is here, who knows your marketplace, who will show you the potential pitfalls where you can end up with 80%, and who can point you to a good secret sauce that will land you in the 20%.
Cool. Thank you so much. That was great. So, folks, here's invaluable advice from Eugene. Keep in mind that to go through the most well-known accelerators, they probably like 1% chance to go through it and get success. So, more you know, more you prepare, more you talk to people, higher chances you have. So, always yours, Peter Maverick, and welcome tomorrow, guys. Have fun.